So, welcome everyone here. That's the second day of our meeting. The next presenter is like Dr. Huichao Xie. I used to think Huichao as my older sister because when I was doing my PhD in Eugene, she was about to finish her. And I used to say that ASQ, our charity project, is like a family because after like, I don't know how many years, maybe 5 to 10 years, we're still together despite the distance. So we're in Brazil right now. Dr. Huichao is Ireland and she will talk about child development from 0 to 6 years of age. The presentation will be totally in English. However, you can use the closed captions options here down below on Zoom, and then you're gonna see like subtitles while she's speaking to us. Wei Chao is like an amazing person, so please if you need any assistance, let her know and let me know as well. I know English is not our first language, me neither. So if you need some assistance, please let me know. Wichao, it's a really pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for having accepted our invitation. And you're right, that's the second time you're here with us. Now you can share your screen anytime you want. The ball's in your court, and I'll be here to listen to your presentation and to help you in case if needed. Okay?
Thank you, Louis. Thanks for the very warm introduction. And I'm so glad to hear that you are saying I'm an amazing person. I'm trying my best to be an amazing person, but today I'm so apologetic because I can't speak Portuguese. And please let me know if I'm not pronouncing something clearly because I'm also not an English native speaker. So my English is not that good, that perfect. And I would like to take this opportunity to talk about some research that I've been pursuing recently in the past maybe 10 years. And as Louis said, I did my PhD at University of Oregon, mainly pursuing research with the Ages and Stages questionnaire, which is a developmental screening measure, as well as some other measures. And today, when I was preparing for my talk today, I was thinking, oh, what can I share with our researchers and students from Brazil? And I was thinking, should I share things about food? Maybe they're not interested, but they are interested in psychometric studies. So child development and psychometric studies. And then I look at the schedule for today. Whoops, there is a name Jane Squires popped up. And I realized that my supervisor, my doctoral advisor, Dr. Jane Squires, she's going to share later on in the day. So in order to not to repeat her sharing at a very poor level, maybe I will just concentrate on the cross-cultural research on child development. How do we measure, how do we assess child development when we are working with children from all sorts of different parts in the world? There are challenges and there are opportunities. So that's the focus for my sharing today. And I'll go really quick, and any questions, please let me know anytime. You could just quickly turn on your microphone and just let me know what your questions or comments are. Or if you want, you could also type in the chat box, and I'll check the chat box every once in a while to make sure that I'm covering everything. So I want to make it a very conversational event today. And I'm so lucky to be the first speaker today. All right, so assessing child development across cultures. And first of all, a little bit about my background. After finishing my PhD training in Eugene, Oregon, what did I do? So first of all, I was born in China, and there is a place called Canton. There are lots of dim sums and other dishes invented in Canton, so it's a food capital. And I grew up there, and I went to college, and I got my first degree, which is Bachelor of Law degree, because my family wanted me to be a judge or to marry a judge. So that they were very disappointed, because later on I became very interested in child development, and I decided to do a master's degree in early childhood education. And that's the first graduate degree I got. And then after that, I practiced as a teacher in several schools and government programs. And then I realized that there are so many children that they don't fit in. That
Mic
means
Max.
that. Hi, Louis. Is there any problem with the microphone?
Yeah, you frozen for a while, but now it's okay.
Whoops.
No
Okay,
problem.
so you can hear me. All right.
Yes.
So I'll continue that I realized there are always many children in every classroom that they don't participate in the activities, they don't follow instructions. So I became very interested in how do we identify those children who have special needs and how do we help them. And that led me to pursuing a master's degree and then later on a doctoral degree from the United States from University of Oregon. And I first did my Master of Science degree in special education and then later on pursue PhD studies and doing a research on the ASQ. And after graduating from University of Oregon, I moved my family to Singapore, where I got back to the Asian culture. And also I was working at the National Institute of Education in Singapore, training lots of teachers and psychologists. And it was a very good 5 years that I was working in Singapore until I realized that I missed winter and I missed a seasonal change. So I looked for other jobs elsewhere and I found a job in Ireland. And that's a lovely picture of me and my current colleagues at University College Dublin. That's where I am right now. I'm presenting to everybody in Dublin, Ireland. This is 1 p.m. in the afternoon. So I'm so grateful that every one of you made it early in the morning. And um, here is the agenda I want to share with everybody. First of all, I would like to touch base on a little bit of the cultural context in child development. Why is it very important to consider the context when we are assessing child development? Because children develop differently in different contexts, and they may demonstrate different skills in different contexts. And then I move on to presenting some studies that I pursued across the years. Some studies using the ASQ3 in China and Singapore, and also some studies exploring the factor structure of the ASQSE and also the second edition from multiple countries. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to discuss a little bit of the current research that I'm doing, collecting data using the AEPS in China. And that AEPS is another child development measure that has way more items than the ASQ, and the adaptation and validation is also very complex. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in and we'll have some time for discussions at the end. First of all, culture is very important in terms of assessing child development. According to Lieberman in 1990, culture is passed down via unconscious transmission of adaptive child rearing mechanisms. So that means that even if you are not intentionally teaching the next generation what is cultural norms and what is cultural rules, you are still passing down a lot of the unspoken rules and the cultural stereotypes or each member's role in the cultural community. And also, culture is defined as the attitudes, values, beliefs, and behaviors that are shared by a group and passed on from generation to generation. So all those attitudes, values, beliefs, and behaviors may shape child rearing, parenting practices, and also have a result on child development. And that can be represented very well by Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model. According to Jane Squires in her book, cultural and family values shape the development and expectations of infants and young children. And also from Center on the Developing Child in Harvard University, it is essential to treat young children's mental health problems within the context of their families, homes, and communities. All these literature is telling us that when we are trying to understand child development, when we are trying to evaluate and assess child development, we can't just pull the child out from the cultural context. We have to situate our assessment practices within the cultural context and try to understand child outcomes based on the context that it is in. And the same principles can be found in this guidebook. I call it the Bible for a lot of psychometric researchers, that the standards for educational and psychological testing, that fairness is a very important principle in conducting high quality assessment. That means that a test that is fair reflects the same constructs for all test takers, which means children in child development. And the scores from this test should have the same meaning, not meaning, but meaning for all individuals in the intended population. Evaluation of the underlying construct of the test within one country or culture may not generalize across broad borders of cultures. So those principles are telling us how important it is for us to evaluate the fairness of assessment when we are applying assessments from one culture, developed in one culture, to children who grew up in a different culture. So that is the guiding principles that I'm basing on to guide today's discussions. Okay, so after all this, I'm going to quickly present on several studies across the years, mainly focusing on adaptation, adapting child development measures, and validating them in different contexts, in the context that those measures were not developed in. So the examples that I'm using today are ASQ3, ASQ-SE2, and AEPS3. Those are very commonly used child development measures. The ASQ3 and ASQ-SE2 are used for developmental screening purposes, and the AEPS3 is used for educational programming purposes. Just a very brief overview. The ASQ3 and the ASQ-SE2, they are looking at different domains. The ASQ3 is a general developmental measure which covers all domains of child development: communication, gross motor, fine motor, problem solving, and personal social. While the ASQ-SE2 only focuses on social emotional development of young children, and both of them can be used for very young children from birth to 5 or 6 years old. So those are the developmental screening measures. And my first study that I was doing as my dissertation study, I collected data from 812 young children in China in order to adapt the ASQ items, ASQ3 items, for use with children in China. So in that study, I reported 3 types of adaptations to make the ASQ items more relevant and valid for children growing up in the Chinese cultural context. The first type of adaptation regards changing the measurement system, because in the United States, they are using the inches and feet system, and in China, they use the centimeters and meters system. And the second type of adaptation is regarding the examples in those test items. Like here in this example, I put it there. Does your child cut up soft food into smaller pieces using a dull knife? For example, can your child use a butter knife to cut bananas or mangoes? And this item in the English test may not be highly relevant to a lot of children in China, because Chinese people don't use fork and knives to eat. Most of them, they use chopsticks and spoons to eat. So in order to make it more meaningful for everyday life, we added some examples using plastic toy knife to cut Play-Doh, which is a very common play activity among Chinese children. So we were adding those examples into the items. And the third type of adaptations is about revising, changing the targeted behaviors. Most of these type of adaptations happen in the communication domain because measuring Chinese language development is very different from measuring English language development. For example, this original item, does your child make her voice go high at the end of a sentence? That is a question, which is a typical common way to indicate question in English language. You ask a question and your voice go higher at the end, like, how are you today? And you go higher at the end. But in Chinese, people don't do that when they ask questions. They use like particle words such as ma or ah at the end of a sentence to indicate this is a question, such like ni hao ma, and that's the ma that indicate this is a question. So we had to revise the original item in order to measure valid constructs. So those are the adaptations of test items. And in the in the subsequent studies that I'm presenting today, most of the assessments that we adapted for use in China follow the same type of adaptations. So I'm not going to repeat it in the future. And in terms of validating the two, we collected psychometric evidence to measure the internal consistency, the concurrent validity based on the Battelle, which is another standardized developmental measure in China. And we tested the retest reliability in 2 to 3 weeks. And we also conducted rash modeling to see whether the items to compare the Chinese sample with the US sample and to identify items that are showing differentiated functioning across the two cultures. And very surprisingly, we found 83% of all ASQ items, they showed differentiated. It is a large, moderate to large level of differentiated item functioning. And that shows how differently maybe parents are interpreting the items differently in two countries, or maybe the children are demonstrating skills differently, they are developing differently. We don't know the answer to that question, but it is really a red flag to us in terms of how do we interpret typical and atypical development when the items are functioning so differently in two countries. Okay, so that's the ASQ study in China. We also conducted the ASQ studies in Singapore when I was an assistant professor in Singapore. So we did several studies, but one of them, it is informed by our findings from China that 83% of items are showing different functioning. So in Singapore, once we have the data set, we are very curious to compare how are those items showing different scores in 5 domains across Singapore sample, in the US sample, and Korean samples. So in this study, we reported that across the 5 domains, you could see that Korean sample showed significant differences with the Singapore sample in communication, gross motor, and problem solving and personal social domains in 9 months. And then none of the domains in 18 months, and only 3 domains in fine motor, problem solving, personal social at 24 months. While the US sample showed significant differences in way more domains across all 3 age intervals. And those findings are further strengthening our beliefs that even across 2 Asian samples, like Korean sample and Singapore sample, that we consider a lot of parenting practices are very similar, and expectations are also very similar, but still children are showing significantly different scores on the ASQ items in many different domains, especially in problem solving domains and personal social domains. So those findings are telling us that child development may look very different across different countries. And when we are using the same measure to measure child development, we have to be very cautious and we have to utilize localized and validated norm reference to determine typical and atypical child development. And so that kind of lessons informed us to look into social emotional development and how do we measure social emotional skills across different cultures. So we did a validation study on the ASQSE2 using it on a large national sample of 2,830 children in China. And we did a lot of the traditional test theory validations like internal consistency and conversion validity, but also we look at the model structure of the ASQSE2. The model structure means there is this this proposed two-factor structure of the ASQSE, which is assuming that when we are using ASQSE2 to measure social emotional development, we are looking at two major areas of development, social skills and emotional skills. So this is a two-factor structure. And we utilize model fit statistics to evaluate whether this two-factor structure shows a good fit in the Chinese national sample. According to the findings, we found that except for the 2 months data, which shows larger than 0.06 RMSEA, all other domains show 60 months also show a larger RMSEA. But a majority of the age intervals show pretty acceptable, pretty decent, acceptable RMSEA value. And also the TLI is pretty high from almost 90.90 to all the way up to 9.96. So those data from 6 months to 48 months supported very well the two-factor structure of the ASQSE2, only except for the youngest one and the oldest one. So we are trying to guess that maybe when children were very, very young, that their skills have not shown very clear differentiation between social skills and emotional skills. Maybe everything is just under one umbrella. And when children are older, like when they're 60 months old, maybe they have already differentiated even more domains of social emotional skills. And a two-factor model may not be appropriate to explain this kind of skills anymore. So those are our assumptions. Further research is needed to justify those assumptions. But those results and findings also trigger our discussions about the two-factor structure of the ASQSE. And that's why Louis and Tom from Taiwan and us from Singapore, we had quite a lot of discussions on the data across the data on ASQSE and ASQSE2 across several countries, including Brazil, China, Taiwan, and the United States. And we look at all those different samples and try to understand to what extent this two-factor structure as well as the ASQSE items are valid in measuring children's social emotional development. And after several discussions, Louis, please chime in if you have other thoughts on our discussions. It happened several years ago, but it is still pretty interesting nowadays that we are trying to look at evidence for social emotional two-factor structure, and we found that overall, it is an adequate to good fit of this two-factor structure across different countries, but there are some nuances. Like for example, in Brazil, there is the unidimensional structure may show more better fit for certain ages. And In China, the two-factor structure is not very good fit with the 2 month age interval. And in Taiwan, they only tested the two-factor structure on a children who are 48 months old, and it shows a good fit. And in the United States, the 2 months data is also not tested because the sample is too small. So these are the factor structure fit findings across the 4 cultures. But furthermore, we found more interesting discussions coming up from the item fit discussions. Like, for example, we are looking at item fit statistics across 4 countries and to see which items are showing misfit in this structure. And also, are they the same items across all those different cultures and different samples? Interestingly, we found this specific item, does your child seem too friendly with strangers? This single item shows significant misfits in the China and the Taiwan samples, but didn't stand out in the Brazilian sample. And the United States, a different item, does your child cling to you more than expected, is showing poor fit with the sample. So different items are showing different functioning in different samples. And here is some questions that when we are comparing the Taiwan sample and the US sample, we are wondering how come there are different items showing different misfit. And that also shows that maybe parents' interpretations of those items vary a lot across different cultural contexts, or maybe that the parenting practices and expectations are different, and their children are developing different skills at the same age across different contexts. And those findings are informing us in terms of we do need to conduct RASH model item response theory modeling to identify possible misfits across different cultural contexts. And not just at the model level, but also at the item level. So that informs the current study that we are conducting in China. The purpose of this study is that we have such a huge demand for educational programming measures on child development in China. There is basically zero available in China. So we are trying to validate, we're trying to translate and adapt the AEPS assessment evaluation programming system for use in China. But based on all those previous studies that I just presented, we learned that just translating and publishing the two in China is not good enough to inform valid use, a valid application of the two, valid interpretation of the assessment results. Therefore, we did conduct RASH modeling item fit statistics to look at what are the model fits and item fits of the AEPS items. And the AEPS, it is a gigantic system. It has 8 domains, not just 5 domains. And also the item fit statistics showed us that most of the item difficulties show a pretty good fit with our sample of 789 children in China. Only in gross domain gross motor development area, the outfit value is slightly higher. And so overall, we think that the item fit statistics is acceptable. We further conduct those bubbling graphs to look at overfit, good fit, and misfit statistics. And in those graphs, I know they are tiny. I try to present as many graphs as possible in one slide. Therefore, they are just very tiny. But here are in the graphs, the blue color The blue color bubbles indicate overfit, and the size of the bubbles indicate measurements errors. And also the black bubbles indicate good fit, and red bubbles indicate misfit. Reference lines, red dashed lines at 0.05 and 1.5 indicate underfit threshold and overfit threshold. Okay, so those are the dashed lines. And in those bubble visualizations of person item parameter distributions across eight measurement dimensions, 8 areas of development, you could clearly see that overall a lot of the items, especially in social emotional, and then later on also in math and literacy, that a lot of the items show in black color, which means those are the good fit. However, there are some problematic items, especially in cognitive adaptability and gross motor and social communication, that there are some red bubbles that are really concerning. So those visualization told us that the misfits across culture also could happen more in certain developmental areas than other developmental areas. And those are the lessons that we are learning right now. We are trying to investigate and trying to analyze when we are trying to introduce AEPS to China. And this is a snapshot of the research on child development that I've been conducting over the years. And now I'm going to take a pause. Oh, wow. Besides that, I want to introduce to everybody a new research that caught my eyeball recently, that in measuring child development, artificial intelligence and machine learning is coming into the picture. So there is a recent literature review being published in 2024. The review is reporting that the number of studies published on using AI in measuring and using AI in child developmental assessment research. It's not necessarily using AI to measure children, but sometimes they use AI to analyze the data. So anyways, nowadays using machine learning and artificial intelligence in developmental assessment, it is a new trend. And you could tell that a large proportion of the published research are using AI to measure language development, which is really a dream comes true, that a lot of the linguistics nowadays, they are using AI models and algorithm to analyze lots of the speech recordings. And cognitive development and also social development are also really an increasing number of research, especially when it comes to identifying ASD, autism spectrum disorders, among children, that AI technology is being used. So all of those previous research that I conducted, as well as the new trend of using AI in developmental assessment, I would like to share with everybody that I'm very interested in looking at those directions in future research. First of all, psychometric evidence for developmental assessment, they vary. So just because we validated one measure like the ASQ in some cultures doesn't mean it is going to work very well in a new culture context. And then validation of developmental assessments should definitely benefit from using not just the traditional test theory analysis, but also utilizing item response model like the RESH model analysis. And applying machine learning models and artificial intelligence in future research on child development assessments is the new direction to explore. So thank you very much. And I'm still learning how to say thank you in Irish language. I'm going to take a shot. Go half mil gat. So that's my best attempt on saying thank you in Irish language. And who can teach me how to say thank you in Portuguese?
I would say obrigado.
Obrigado.
Yeah, almost that. How do we say thank you in Chinese? I just know ni hao.
Yes, that's hello. 谢谢.
Yes, yeah, almost there.
Yes, that's thank you. Thanks. Well, that's great. I'm sure when I go to Lisbon for the conference, I'm able to say bom dia and also, can you say thank you again?
Obrigado.
Obrigado. Okay, I'll
But
practice.
But actually, we
Obrigado.
have people here in this conference from Portugal because yesterday we got some friends
Oh,
from
that's
Portugal.
wonderful.
And that's crazy because once I was there and I was trying to get a coffee, I have a problem with coffees, and people were speaking to me in English because of my accent. And then I was
Oh,
like, pissed off. Yeah, yeah, maybe
nice.
Daniel Marques are here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is Daniel Mas here?
Yeah, yeah. So he's from Lisbon as well. So Danielle, you wanna turn on your microphone, please? Let's see if it's here. Bom dia,
Hey,
Daniel. There you go. Bom dia, Daniel.
How
My
can
my
I
first
listen?
my first question for you is why people from Portugal speak so different Portuguese?
I do not know. I
And I
think
think
the Brazilian Portuguese is kind of sweet Portuguese, uh, more a more funny Portuguese. I don't know. Whenever I talk with Brazilian colleagues, and even students here in Portugal, in Aveiro, um, I have the impression that these guys are happy when they talk.
yeah,
um,
good
I don't know
impression.
that they are Brazilian Portuguese. I think it's some kind of I don't know. They seem happier people. You know?
Maybe because we have like a big sun here above the sky, we have
Yeah.
beaches, we have everything like together, and it make us feel happy. But our politicians makes us feel sad all the time.
Yeah.
So that's amazing because I was talking to Huichao. We working on the same project. We call that Asian Stage Questionnaire. It's like a very, very elegant questionnaire that you use to assess child development and social and emotional outcomes from child as well, from children. And we have like I don't remember every 2 years. I think it's every two
yes.
years we have like an international meeting. The last one I don't remember. I think it was in the United States, but it was during the pandemics, right?
During the pandemics, I didn't go to that one because I couldn't
Me
travel.
neither. Yeah, me
Yeah.
neither. Everything was like closed, but I can't remember where was the last ASQ meeting. Do you?
There was one in 2022, right after the pandemic, right?
Right.
Oh,
Yes.
that one is in Chicago. Yes, I went to that one.
I didn't. I didn't. So, but Danielle, the next one will be in Lisbon this year in September.
And the Congress is about
Actually,
childhood.
yeah, actually, we have like a tool. The name is Asian Stage Questionnaire. It's like a test that we use to assess psychological well-being, regulation,
Yeah.
compliance, and a lot of factors that I don't remember quite well of children. And we have like two main versions. One is like more general, more global. We call Asian Stage Questionnaire, like 2 months, 4 months, and so on. And the second one, as Wichao said, is related to social and emotional outcomes.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and
Whoops. Is it me who's frozen? I guess so.
No, 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 no. He's
oh,
Oh
frozen.
no, it's
maybe
Louis.
Maybe it's you know, we are happier here in Brazil, but our Wi-Fi connection is not that good. And Danielle, we have like every 2 years a meeting, an international meetings. The next meeting will be this year in Portugal. And I think the main thing of an international meeting is to, you know, like get coffees, make new friends, and discuss some things. So you're more than invited to join us if you want that.
Where it took place?
It will be in Lisbon. I don't remember when. I think it's gonna be in September. And let me
Yeah,
have a
the
look here
first
really
week.
fast. First week of September, right?
And the
Yes.
location?
The
Some
location will be,
university?
oh, not at all. Will be September 5 to 7.
Yep.
I don't know the location. Okay. So all events will
The
take place at the,
university.
no, it will be at the Lisbon Marriott. It's a it's a very
Lisbon
fancy
Marriott.
hotel. Yeah, it's a very fancy hotel, you know.
Okay.
I need to decide my clothes. So Danielle, you're more than welcome and invited
Thank
to
you.
join us if you want that, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can see you there, it would be great. Well, I'm so curious to know, like from other countries, when I first arrived in Ireland, of course, I'm trying to make connections with ASQ researchers in Ireland, and I had a very big challenge finding them because the last paper published that mentioned ASQ in Ireland was like 15 years ago.
Really?
Nobody's doing ASQ research in Ireland. So I was trying to go to local conferences in Ireland and present some ASQ data and try to attract some people with like minds, and people just walked away and they were not very interested in ASQ data. So I started to have meetings with professors in like early childhood development and early childhood education and try to understand why are people not interested in ASQ research and why are they not using ASQ to do research in Ireland. And I realized that there is a big cultural barrier here, that most of the, first of all, it is healthcare people who are monitoring child development, and education people and psychology people, they start looking at children when they are very old, like when they're 5 or 6, because the Irish public school starts when children are 5, and once they start public school, the psychologists, the public funded psychologists and the teachers are working with children, and they are trying to understand whether they have special needs or not. But then before that, the school system is not picking up children who have special needs and disabilities. And the psychologists, they are not working with very young children before they enter public school. So therefore, nobody's using the ages and stages questionnaire to screen children's development. I want to know, in Brazil, are they still using ASQ? And in Portugal, are they using any developmental measures like the ASQ? How are they going to identify young children who have developmental problems and disabilities?
And
Yeah.
maybe Danielle knows more than me about Portugal. In my opinion, Portugal is way ahead of Brazil in all kinds of screening and things like that. So they're much more advanced. In the reality, when we have to cite people like from Portuguese speak countries, people will not like that. But Portugal is like way ahead of Brazil in science. And I don't know about Portugal, but I know in Brazil, it's like a mix. Clarissa said just here in Brazil, we kind of consider the Vineland 3 scale to be the gold standard assessing child development. We don't have
Yeah.
the national validation of this scale as well as Bailey scales. What do you think
Mm-hmm.
of these scales in comparison to ASQ3? So in Brazil, it's like a mix between like qualitative approach and quantitative approach, and it depends on the government. So when I
Yeah.
was doing my PhD, we had like a very large assessment program here that made us to have like 1 million children assessed like on a row. But nowadays, I don't know how it's going here in Brazil. I don't know in Portugal, Daniel. How people in Portugal assess like child development and screen children with like
Okay.
delays or problem?
Um, to my knowledge, which is quite limited in this area because my specialization is out of the of this context. But at least to my knowledge, and I suppose that there are some people researching strongly this area, but I think the most used measures are probably the Griffith scale, the Griffith's battery, I think, and some other one I don't remember. But only recently we have some adaptation of this scale.
Yeah.
And regarding this scale specifically, I don't know if there is any version adapted into European Portuguese here. But there are psychologists and some professors at some universities here in Portugal who develop
Yep.
who develop lots of work in children. But my feeling is there is scarcity in this domain in terms of psychological assessment arsenal.
Exactly.
In terms
Right.
of development, because when we talk about psychopathology or psychological symptoms,
Yeah.
I think the scenario is quite better. But in
Yeah,
terms
you
of developmental measures, I think it's not so great. But
and
I don't know, at least to my knowledge.
And just to make a complimentary comment on Daniel's talk, in Brazil, there's like a boom of the autism spectrum disorder. Out of
Right.
nowhere, people started talking about that for children and for adults as well. So, of course, it's not my main field. However,
Yeah.
all the time I'm on Instagram trying to find like something beautiful, like dogs jumping, cats like looking around, and I see like autism spectrum disorder, all the people with all kinds of background talking about autism spectrum disorder, and I don't know why this trend. But in Brazil, I don't know about Portugal.
Yes,
Same
In
in
Brazil,
England.
the current trend.
the
It is
same
the same in
happens.
Ireland.
uh,
A number of special classes for autistic children has
Mhm.
grown in 10 times over the 5 years. 10 times more special classes for autistic children. Now the proportion of autistic children receiving special education is like #1 right now. I don't know what happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here, we witness the boom that Louis was talking about, and I would say in neurodevelopmental disorders in general, uh, in the autism, of course, and ADHD.
ADHD,
Uh,
yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
and
that's
all
correct.
and all the issues surrounding the medication and yes, but
Yeah,
I would,
exactly.
yeah.
That's
Go
like
ahead.
ADHD and ASD, and they are all falling under the umbrella of neurodiversity nowadays. And then there is this very strong movement nowadays in disability studies in UK and Ireland, advocating for children's voices, children-centered approach in terms of serving that population of neurodiversity. So therefore, ASQ, it is the gold standard for measuring child development because it's parent completed. It is no
That's
longer,
correct.
yeah, it is no longer just whatever clinician or a professional doing a lot of the assessment and observation on children. It is a parent-friendly too. Therefore, it fits the trend very well. Well, thank you very much. It's now 2:01, and I don't want to take over the time for the next speaker. So thank you for the discussion, and I really enjoyed that.
Just a second, Huichao, there's a clear difference between Brazil and you because in Brazil we have a tradition that we always start things later as expected, you know? It's unpolite to start on time.
Sorry. Okay, my fault. It's my problem.
Yeah, and it was like a cultural immersion because all the time we do that. And here in Brazil, especially in Rio de Janeiro, let's say invite you to my house. So come over here and say, I'm going. It's like 1 hour at least, you know. And people know
It's
that
good to know.
because if I invite you someone to my house, I'm even not at my house. So it's crazy, right?
It's great to
Uh,
know that. What a relief. I was thinking like, oh, dragging too long, and I feel so guilty.
Not at all, not at all. Actually, you can feel comfortable. And Renato is a student of mine. He just said to me right now, because here in Brazil, we are evolving in a politics that people with disability can ask for like governmental privilege, like reduction
Huh?
of taxes and things like that. And
That's
maybe,
great.
yeah, maybe that's one reason of this increase of diagnosis, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
I don't know in
see.
Ireland.
That's great. While in Ireland, I'm currently collecting a survey study data. I have 500 people responded, but I'm still waiting for more. I'm trying to understand how late are children getting the assessment, because it is really shocking that based on the current 500 responses, the average age for children with disabilities to be identified is like 5 years old. 5 years old children get identified. And
Like
can
too
you
late.
imagine? Yeah, when they are getting intervention. And then it's already really very late, because the waiting list for intervention is also very long. So they're not getting any additional support unless you are rich. You go to private psychology and private therapy services, but that's very rare. And if you are going with the public system, you may be 6 or 7 years old when you start intervention. That's very, very late.
That's crazy because you're describing Brazil and you're in Ireland because in Brazil is about the same. So if people are
Oh,
rich, people can have like everything, like helicopter to go to the hospital. However, if
yes.
you're, yeah, you know, like rich problems. However, if you're poor, you need to have like public services and it takes forever to get assessed and to have an diagnosis and then to have like intervention or rehabilitation. That's exactly the same thing that's happening here right now. However, I don't know if here we have like a goal of changing that. I don't see that in an horizon. I don't.
No. Well, in Ireland, they are trying to establish a new model. It's called the AIM assessment for intervention or something. So they are trying to go earlier, but there are lots of fightback. Like for example, in our university, we are trying to train classroom teachers to be able to conduct assessment. So if classroom teachers can do assessment, that can be moving the identification age way earlier. But then we get a lot of feedback from the Association of Educational Psychologists because
Right?
they believe it is psychologists' work to do the assessment. They believe teachers are not capable of conducting assessment. So they are trying to push back and they are trying to make it exclusive. And all those things of tension and dynamics across different domains and disciplines, they're just making progress impossible and very difficult.
That's crazy because it's exactly the same discussion that we're having here and maybe in Portugal. I think the only difference is the language that you discuss because the topic is about the same, you know. When I was
Really?
young, my mother used to say that mothers are equal entire world. The only difference is the
Yes.
language, you know.
Yes, yes, it's just like that. I am also fascinated to know there are so many similarities. And even if you go to China, there are also similar things. There are fights over there that the healthcare doctors, the physicians, they are fighting with the childcare programs in terms of who is eligible in doing developmental screening. And then now in Ireland, there is a similar fight, and in Brazil, there are similar fights over there. I look forward to talking with you more when we are meeting in Portugal
Portugal.
and in Lisbon. And I'm not even expecting to go to Oregon nowadays. I was going to Oregon to attend the DEC conference, and
Really?
then
It
now
was last year. Oh no,
DEC,
last year it was in California, the last year.
yeah, this year is in Oregon.
Oh yeah, you're right. We're gonna be in Portland. You're right. So
I
you're
was
gonna meet,
going
right?
to go,
Uh-huh,
but I
sorry.
was totally scared because I have heard from my colleagues. There is one colleague from Germany, and she was trying to go to the United States for a conference, and she was rejected to enter the country because there is an issue on her passport years ago about a visa, and she was staying a little bit longer than the visa that allowed her to stay. So she couldn't enter the United States. And
Oh,
I
that's
have
crazy.
similar
Yeah.
issues with my previous US visas. So I feel like maybe I should just wait for the next opportunity. I don't even dare to go to the United States nowadays.
Yeah, maybe we should wait for the next president, right?
Right. So, well, once I hear that ASQ is in Lisbon, there is this ISEI, International Society in Early Intervention. They also host a conference before the ASQ conference. It is also in Lisbon, so it is a great opportunity. Oh, Fernando said it is the same situation in Spain. Early assessment is very complex and depends on a clinical medical opinion. Thank you for sharing. And I think it's time for us to advocate for sharing the privilege of conducting assessment across more disciplines. Don't make it exclusive to just medical clinicians, physicians, and psychologists. We should advocate for parents doing the assessment. We advocate for teachers doing the assessment. Advocate for people who don't have the clinical training to be able to collect data from observing children and to utilize those data to understand child development. That would be a
Oh,
big
that
project to do.
totally true. Totally true. Second that. Wow. So we are having a very nice conversation. We are having a very nice talk. However, now it's like 10:10, you know, we need to move
Is it
forward.
time? I don't know.
It is time, yeah, I guess.
Great,
Huichao,
wonderful.
thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for bright us this day. It was amazing. It was really
Thank you.
amazing.
It is my privilege to be sharing and discussing with everyone here. I really enjoyed the discussion today. Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. Thank you, Carissa, Renato, and Fernando in the chat box. Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye. Have a good
Bye.
one.
Thanks.